This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.
Hello, everybody. We got, once again, Robert Cohen on the show. We're talking about a giant music act known as the Crystal Method.
Oh, yeah.
I was seeing a lot of people light up on this one because it was just one of those where it's like, oh, yeah. A lot of people have heard of them. All music referred to them as, again, America's answer to, the Chemical Brothers. And that got me thinking, that's so right. Yeah, them and the Prodigy were English duos. They weren't, from America at all. But you kind of forget because you just heard them. I mean, all these bands were being played nonstop on MTV, various movie soundtracks, and even making original music for like TV show themes and video games. Like more people have heard of the Crystal Method than they realize probably if they went to a rave club or just, if they're watching an episode of Bones, you've heard them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how did you first get into electronic music, Rob?
Oh, good Lord. That's trickier than just saying, good Lord, Crystal Method is my favorite electronic music by far. I've always loved them. I loved that first album, Vegas. So,
oh, yeah.
It came out in 96? I was not aware of them before 96. I know they did some stuff from 93 to 95, but I certainly was aware when Vegas came out, and it really grabbed me. I loved it. And I've gotten all their albums since then. I've seen them twice in the past couple of years. I've driven to see them in San Diego. So I can't remember where I first heard it, but it grabbed me when that first album came out, and I've been listening to and getting everything since.
Okay, so a typical kind of introduction. I think Vegas was actually the third one I heard by them, but it was all interjected because, all their songs, Born Too Slow, Keep Hope Alive, Name of the Game, they're just being played on virtually every single, even TV commercials. Other
than, a few small singles and stuff, that is their first album.
Yeah, Vegas by far, there's just so many hits on it, and I didn't realize that Outpost Recordings was related to David Geffen's record company, so I was like, that makes sense. So that's he was using them on all the alternative labels, and it helped that one of my uncles had, again, Legion of Boom, that entire album, and that was getting played in every other Super Bowl commercial.
Yeah. They definitely, I guess we could both say for sure part of getting exposed to Crystal Method was how quickly commercials and films jumped on using their music and TV shows. So you definitely heard that stuff in TV commercials.
It was just kind of during the time where everyone was becoming oversaturated, so just like everyone's talking shit about the new grunge and new metal bands, is like, it was hard to tell a lot of the electronic bands apart because there's just so many of them. And this was before dubstep was coming out and pissing people off how,
right,
it's not even the same thing, but it's confusing people even more who aren't familiar. And I definitely listened to a lot of sections from Tweakin'. It was just one of those, it was their second album, but I guess
I love Tweakin'.
I especially, I think it's Murder is one of them, and it didn't get all that much play in mainstream thing. I think one of the songs plays in Zoolander. Ben Stiller seems to be a huge fan.
Another thing for me that really worked about it is I'm 51 9 as of this weekend. And
Oh, nice.
My son is 36. So the 90s were really his era, much more than mine. Up through the 80s and fair amount of the 90s, I was keeping really up on all the new music. And by the 2000s, between age and just the degeneration of the music industry, it got harder and harder. But there was still stuff in the 90s that would really grab me. And it's fun for me that there's a few bands. My son likes hardcore music a little bit more, is his genre. But Crystal Method has always been something we share. So when they come and play, I'm like, you want to go? And for him, it's like nostalgia time. He's like, oh, yeah, I like them from the 90s and video games. So it's something we've always been able to share and do together. So I also realized that for him, in the 90s, he was a video game kid. So, that Vegas was in the Mortal Kombat soundtrack.
Yes, and remixed, so to speak, too. So, yeah.
And it was in Spawn, the first Spawn movie.
That is like the best part of that otherwise very hard to watch movie, because like you had freaking Richard Patrick, former 9 Inch Nails backup and head guy of Filter, interjecting his vocals on there, and you're like, wow, this is a hell of a score.
But yeah, their music became quite out there in lots of places. I know a lot of it was all blurred together, but to my ear, it stood out. Like, who are these guys? Because this is what I like.
Mm-hmm. I was always disappointed that I didn't get to see them, live. And Ken Jordan and Scott Kirkland always come off as just very nice. And I mean, some of the lyrics are just occasionally very sarcastic. And I think that's kind of what I took from it, is like, these are guys who are very comfortable in their skin. And even seeing, I think, when there was like artist spotlights on iTunes, they would select songs or movies they were big fans of. And I think they said like a movie that got them into making music was Once Upon a Time in the West. And I do recall they kind of sampled it, I think, on one of their albums, probably the community service one, which was already taking Doors and New Order samples, and they were remixing it even more.
Yeah, their remixes when they play live or on the community service radio show, where you hear them just mixing lots of stuff beyond their own music. They really did, go down that road from, some of the 80s new wave stuff where they're sampling just really cool dialogue and sound effects, and using a lot of that stuff was very typical of their music.
That's cool, because it does get, anyone else, it would kind of seem like a sellout, but like they're just using the DJ money to make their next few albums. And their second to last one is definitely what one I heard. I don't think I heard much of the more recent, like 2018 one, and not that I didn't want to, I just didn't know about it. But it was just interesting how, next thing I know, it was like a few years later, one of their songs is like being played in like ads for, again, just giant movies like Fast and Furious 5. And I'm just like, okay, it's cool. So they're still kicking. Their songs are even being played in less seen movies like Skyline. And I think the reason movie guys use them is it's not just because they legit like them. I think it's also because it does kind of have kind of a fun, involving feel. It's like the perfect kind of song to insert. Come on, Replacement Killers. They had a music video for that.
Yeah, we should cover a fair amount of their stuff, because normally we're a movie and media podcast, and they're clearly involved in soundtracks and stuff.
Almost Human had some great original music by them.
Too, that song, The Name of the Game, was used in a lot
everywhere, remixed.
A lot of basketball and sports stuff. So it got out there to like people watching ESPN and all that stuff were constantly using their music.
I think they still are in some ways if you hear some live telecast, but it's not even the warm-up song. It's like that go out and kick some ass song. And it is funnier when you even see some of those movies. Sometimes they were PG-13 and they edit out, the foul mouth lyric. Another time it's an R-rated movie, but it's playing on TV. So it's just so funny how they have to awkwardly just edit out the mother.
You talked about some people accusing them of selling out, and I brought up sports. So that's a perfect combination on the fact that actually one of my favorite albums of theirs, if not my most favorite album of theirs, is called Drive.
Yes. Oh my
The
God.
album Drive was specifically paid for by Nike
Yeah.
to make a workout album. I mean, talk about sellout, but I didn't give a shit. I'm like, I put that on to like go jogging and walking and hiking. It's such a great album.
You often will even see, to make it even more meta, someone will be working out in a gym or running, and you'll see one of those songs playing. But yeah, Keep Hope Alive is one of those, and I think Get Busy.
That Doors remix is awesome.
It really is, especially when they start making Jim Morrison's vocals echo. But I mean, Get Busy Child is actually kind of my unofficial workout jam.
Yeah, it's a great workout album. Who would have thunk?
It's just the perfect kind of just get to it, you know. And I think that's what these interjects.
It's not just workout. You know, when you're at home and you're like, oh, I feel lackadaisical and I need to kind of supercharge my day and get to work. You put that thing on, and you're ready to fucking clean the house in 2 hours.
Yes, you are. 9 Inch Nails heals my soul, and Crystal Method just makes me, I don't know why, just cheerful. Like, just anybody can be a badass.
Definitely.
Oh, jeez. But it is kind of wild too how, like, I mean, sometimes like people would even know them more even just after the fact. Like one of their song again, Keep Hope Alive was the freaking theme for the ER spinoff Third Watch, which dealt with, you know, paramedics, firefighters, and I didn't know that for the longest time. I just knew, I would see people sometimes say that in the forums, hey, that's the theme song for that show. And I didn't know, because that show was always on at an awkward time. And I didn't know about it years later. And I even saw it like 20 years later, you know, when everyone stopped giving a shit. But it was interesting how it's like, they're kind of used by even kind of just cult and independent movies. So that's kind of interesting too. I think they are very easy to afford, and I think they want to do a good job.
They're not super radio hits, so their music is probably a little bit more affordable to license.
Have you heard them on the radio ever, aside from satellite radio, obviously? But
it's a good question.
I know, I don't know, but I would not doubt that. Obviously, you know, Name of the Game music video definitely got some MTV play, but and especially maybe the Spawn music video, which, I mean, for God's sakes, it's one of the special features. It's the only reason to buy the damn movie. But yeah, I can't ever recall even some live concerts being recorded on something like HDNet or any of those other live music channels that are still around. And it's a shame, because I think it would totally roll. It'd be so much fun to see them.
I think that's a little different. I mean, even stuff from their last 2 albums, he made music videos, and so I've seen those music videos play on formats other than just YouTube. But even YouTube makes a difference. People watch the shit out of videos on YouTube. But yeah, not so much on the radio. Just a quick side note, I did remember too, it's easy for me to think that, you know, Name of the Game is so old, but it's actually from Tweekend. So
yeah.
It feels like so original for them, but that, you know, that second album is great top to bottom, and had some of their biggest hits on it as well.
It has it's very gritty in terms of some of the lyrics, just showing, especially Murder and some of those other ones. It's letting them experiment a little more, and because Vegas was just like the banger, the one that made you just want to play all of them on repeat and never get tired. And that second album, Tweekend, was just kind of casual party music, but kind of an alternative kind, if that makes sense, because it's like they, again, you know, not obviously their music's going to be played at clubs, but if you're not in a club or going anywhere, it was interesting just seeing them just kind of, like you say, just remix it at a live studio event, or and again, utilize the sports stuff, because it's totally for that kind of adrenaline pumping. I guess altogether, the reason they're electronic super gods is just, again, there's nothing shady about them. They're great collaborators. They've gone in so many other pop and even country music guys to even provide some vocals. So it's interesting how they've kind of crossed over to just different platforms. They're adaptable.
And they are very nice. Like every time I've seen them live, Scott always comes out afterwards and shakes our hand and takes pictures, and he's super friendly and nice. And at some point we should discuss, let's save it toward the end. It's basically the last two albums, The Trip Home and The Trip Out, are the two albums that are both post Ken Jordan's departure. And it's interesting, let's come back to it, whether or not that really makes much difference in terms of the sound.
Also, now this is eye-opening. I did not know that, but yeah, I'll leave that for near the end.
All right. So let me go back to Tweekend then for a second, because this is a little anecdotal story fun, but it gets into breaking down the music a little bit. So my favorite track on Tweekend is the 8th track called 10 Miles Back. It's got this beautiful female vocal by a girl named Julie Giallos, or Galios.
Yeah, and this was cool researching this album because I didn't realize there was people from Stone Temple Pilots and Rage Against the Machine and just miscellaneous others who are big, powerful figures in the music industry. And you're just like, oh, that's them? Oh, okay. I always
right. Tom Morello's on Wild, Sweet, Cool, and he's on Name of the Game. So that's awesome. But so this song, 10 Miles Back, what I love about it is that it's simultaneously incredibly slow and incredibly fast at the same time.
Yeah.
There's an underbeat that's very slow and groovy and slow winding. And then on top of it is that kind of intense, hard heartbeat. And so a friend of mine was asking me for music that I could recommend to her for her strip club show act.
Nice.
And I recommended that song because you could do that slow, sensuous thing, and then it's also got that pounding excitement on top of it. And
it is kind of stimulating kind of music, if that makes sense. It could totally be used for any kind of mood. So I think maybe that's why everyone uses them.
Sometimes it can be very sensuous, and it's very exciting, and it's very invigorating. So yeah, it's interesting to me that why I like it so much. And I have a number of friends who are DJs, and I've DJ'd a bit, but I have a hard time, I'm more of a film guy and I love sound, but it's hard for me sometimes to really hear something and go, oh, that's this type of music, or oh, that's that type of music. And so I was talking to a DJ friend of mine, like, let's really look at what would music people call Crystal Method? Because back in the day I had heard big beat, and he was like, yeah, but that's kind of a misnomer for what they really are, which was what he said, break beats or electro beats.
Yeah, it's not even going to a simple, it's more, it's so true. And I think that's just it. So many just didn't know how to describe it. So there's like, oh, it's more of the same. It's like, it's not more of the same.
Yeah, I mean, electronic is a big catch-all, and that's fine. Or EDM, that's fine.
They're not trance, but they could probably do trance if they wanted to.
And I think a lot of people would say house, and that's definitely wrong.
Because house doesn't have any. Yeah, it has a pattern, but it's more of a just kind of repetition, and they're all about. They are very diverse in how it begins and ends. It's never repeat. It's more.
One other thing that he said that I thought was interesting is he said that a lot of rap is technically break beats, because anything with a broken beat in it is technically break beat, and a lot of rap has that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, because they kind of even rap in the lyrics a bit.
Yeah, and so I'm not a huge rap fan, but I recognize there's 10 to 20% of rap that's really stands out for me as great quality, and I enjoy it. And something about Crystal Method, like, this is the electronic music sound that I just really like the best. And maybe that ties in with my love of movie soundtracks and why they fit so well to so many visual projects, is that their music is very visually stimulating in just, the listening to it. It activates my imagination. It gets your blood going. You can just see action sequences happening right and left.
Right.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen overnight. They definitely, it was cool knowing that they had been on the scene and first got noticed around 94 and then just kept working it, by 97 again, that was the breakout. And I've had pals who have seen them live and never been disappointed. They could have played the same set each time and they would never been disappointed. But that's the other interesting part. But I wanted to see them so many times during college, and it was just always at a nightclub. It'd be 2 a.m, and I'm like, yeah, that's not happening. So
Scott's still touring, and it's a great show anytime. So you're going to get more chances. Just keep your eyes out, your ears open, because
if there's
he will be coming your way sometime.
I don't think he's turned down any city. And I mean, do they play in Vegas a lot? Is that where they really got their start?
But I live in Tucson, Arizona, which is, Phoenix is the big market, and he plays here all the time. So it's great.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are there been any other particular acts in his live show that you think just kind of stood out even more?
What do you mean by acts in his live show?
Just like in how he would divide his samples up. Would he even remix some of his pre-established songs?
Oh yeah, well, 90% of the show is just him remixing his own music. The same as like if I see a Spangle DJ set, he's almost all of what he plays is just going to be remixes of his own album stuff. So that's the majority of it. But he always will mix in some cool stuff. In the last show, there was a last couple of shows that he did a remix of Prodigy. One of my favorites was he did a remix. It wasn't even originally, there's another DJ who did the remix and then he played it and then he tweaks it his own way. I couldn't tell you who was the original DJ, but a beautiful, just thumping version of one of Massive Attack's slowest songs, Teardrop.
I think I did notice that they crossed over with those two big guys, but I totally forgot that they also worked with The Heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And they just remixed their song Play for Real like 4 different times.
So you take a song like Teardrop, which is like, got that beautiful voice of the singer from Cocteau Twins. And she's just, teardrop on the water, la da 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 da, and then that da 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 da, and it just builds and builds and builds, and then that fucking break, that beat just drops, and the whole room is just bouncing. Oh, it's so much fun.
I do find Massive Attack very underrated, and
it's one of my big time favorites. Love Massive.
Can't remember what's the song that's like the theme for House that Massive Attack does.
Oh yeah, it's off of their first album, Mezzanine. I can't think of the name of it at the moment.
Well, what do you know? It is Teardrop.
There you go.
But it's remixed a bit.
Yeah.
Hell. There's another song by Massive Attack. Sorry to departure a little bit on that, but I think they and Crystal, they're an English act, but they're interesting in that kind of like Crystal Method. Again, they've been around so long, and again, they're adaptable. Trying to remember the song that plays. Well, actually, it doesn't play.
In what?
Actually, it doesn't play in anything. I'm just trying to remember. Angel. Oh my God, what?
Oh yeah, Angel is that was one of their most famous songs.
What a hell of a song. And
and like I said, I traveled for that. I went to LA to see the 20th anniversary of that album, the Mezzanine album. That was a great show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and they had God, I'm embarrassed. They had what's her name, the singer from Cocteau Twins, to sing Teardrop. And it made you want to cry. It was so beautiful. Elizabeth Fraser. That's her name.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, anyone's interested, Elizabeth Fraser has a new solo project EP coming out on Record Store Day this June. 2022, and I am very much looking forward to hearing that. She's an amazing singer.
Totally. Everyone's still seeking out physical media, even though, everyone's doing the whole listen to it digitally on Spotify. Is like, for some of these guys, they're always going to have an audience because so many people are just sick of just a lot of the mainstream music that's played on the radio,
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's hard to get by. There's some great college radio stations still that you can get on. Now that we have internet radio, I mean, you can just hear some amazing stuff from around the world. But local radio is really hard.
I listen to all the PBS funded kind of stations that play a lot of alternative and local music, as well as, like you say, college radio, because some of the college radios are finally going nationwide. They got enough funding, which is great, because you hate to think that just no one wants to play any older music, or just something that is only owned by Universal or Sony.
And I love diversity. So if you want, I'll do my quick shout out. My number one favorite internet radio is WFMU, which is a college radio station out of New Jersey.
Oh, sweet.
It's so diverse. There's an entire soundtrack show every week. And all their shows have playlists that are archived, and the entire shows are archived. So you could listen to every single show and check the titles and artists on every song for all of their music going back like at least a decade.
So it's an evolution of music as opposed to just, keeping it right there. That is cool.
Yeah, love that. So here's I'm just thinking anecdotally, I didn't watch any of it. I don't know if you saw the commercials, but they did another one of these freaking TV game show things that I don't watch, like American Idol, and America's Next Dancer.
Like doing a promo for it, or?
No, not a promo. They had a new show called, I should look it up, like America's Song Contest. And it was one artist from every state would have their song, and then they would compete to see which song out of all 50 states would be America's song. And they got Scott to be the guy with the song from Nevada, Scott Kirkland. So he was on the show competing as a contestant on that show.
You know what? I might have to check that out now.
Representing the state of Nevada. And I don't know how far he got in the show, but it's pretty funny. It was probably good publicity for him.
Yeah, I mean, all you got to literally do is be yourself and the right people. It doesn't matter if you win or not. You got paid to perform,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's wild. Well, shit. I don't like reality shows, but I might have to actually check
I don't like them either, but I'll watch one performance of the guy I like, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, you can't lose. I'm sure it's on YouTube now.
We'll return after these messages.
If you like small-town mystery, crazy news, and wild history, then the Florida Men on Florida Man podcast is for you. Each week, Josh Mills and Wayne McCarty bring you the absolute best Florida has to offer. So if you're looking for a show that's safe for the family, but funny enough to help you escape everyday life, then listen to the Florida Men on Florida Man podcast. That's Florida Men, plural, on Florida Man podcast.
Hey, it's Brent Pope, the host of Breakfast with Brent Pope. You've seen me on some of your favorite TV shows saying things like, "Give it up, Jimmy. You got to sink this putt to win." On Breakfast with Brent Pope, I sit down with guests from the entertainment world, and we do it all over breakfast. Or should I say Brentfast? Every week on Brentfast, you get inside Hollywood info and tips, great breakfast recs and foodie debates. Most of all, you get the most delightful 30 minutes of your week. So dig in. It's Brentfast time. Listen at Brentfast.com, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found.
The Jacked Up Review Show podcast is honored to be part of the Blind Knowledge Podcast Network. Join anytime, talk the talk, and enjoy yourselves. There's something enlightening for everyone with this crowd of cool cats. Check them out.
Oh, speaking of other bands that are related, I'll say this, because, speaking of electronic music, back in the day growing up, loving a lot of the early stuff from, God, I discovered that way later, Manuel Gottschling, a German composer who was super early, but Kraftwerk, Tangerine Dream, and all that stuff. But I was a huge Alan Parsons fan when I was a kid in high school and still am. And they put out an album in 2004 called A Valid Path. And Crystal Method collaborated with them on that album and on a song specifically called We Play the Game. They've collaborated with a lot of people, done remixes, not just of The Doors, but Uncle and Smashing Pumpkins. And yeah, I mean, he's a professional artist, and I really like to see somebody not, it doesn't ever feel to me like selling out. It just feels to me like he's a working artist. He will create music for films, commercials, TV shows, sporting events, whatever it is. He's a very talented guy. They both were. And I just feel like, if the hardest working man in rock and roll was who? Is that expression always jump back, kiss myself? Wow, see me as my old man brain, and I can't remember names.
I mean,
yes,
debatable.
No, who always used to say that about himself? Jump back, kiss me. Eddie Murphy used to do the impression of him.
Oh, James Brown.
Yeah, James Brown. See, it's humiliating when you can't remember James Brown's name, but it's a brain fart because of my senility. But yeah, maybe we could say that Scott Kirkland's the hardest working man in electronic dance music. I don't know, but he's certainly all over. He's all over the map. We could agree to that.
Yeah, definitely for the best. And I wish these are people who I think they're critic proof, but they really do deserve some Grammys. Yeah. Obviously, they've already charted, but just the talent is there. Even people who don't like electronic music are going to probably be able to even get out of their thick skull and acknowledge, hey, they did one hell of a job,
Yeah. I just noticed the single that he was doing for the American Song Contest is called "Watch Me Now." You can probably find that on YouTube, whichever performances he did.
Hell, they've even done remixes in. I forgot that. That's right. They would occasionally pop up on remixed albums. Like they did a Why So Serious remix on the Dark Knight soundtrack, and they did one of the 24 TV show theme, as well as even Pirates of the Caribbean. So Hans Zimmer got him on the action. They did a Rebel Yell remix for a recent Billy Idol revitalized. I had no idea. Wow. Yep. Man, I got to check these albums out.
I see another one of my youth favorites, Jean-Michel Jarre, Maurice Jarre, the famous film composer, his son.
Yeah,
they're apparently going to be doing a collaboration coming up soon, but it's not out yet.
Maurice Jarre. Trying to think. Man. So Maurice Jarre.
Well, his son, Jean-Michel Jarre, was the electronic pioneer. He put out all kinds of amazing electronic music in the in the 80s.
Man, oh man! So Maurice, he's known for.
But yeah, his father was the classic
David Lean.
They're back, doing big time Hollywood movies.
Man, shit, this is awesome.
Yeah, but I would definitely recommend checking out some early Jean-Michel Jarre. It was very spacey, influential early electronic music.
I'll have to.
Yeah.
He looks so much like Paul Oakenfold, kind of.
That's right. And Paul Oakenfold's playing here in a couple of weeks.
Is he? Okay.
I've never seen him, so I'm going to go check it out.
There's another guy who just immortalized, and I know we're covering him this year, but I mean, we were talking about the gods of electronic music. Oh, man.
How do you feel about Moby? Do you think he would be in that group too? Or
I really do like Moby. I love Curve. I love Andy Hunter's kind of another one who everyone kind of knows.
The biggest Fat Boy Slim. I like that.
Fat Boy Slim is really amazing. I've lost track of how many people keep forwarding that well-known song that they do that Christopher Walken's in the music video of, and I'm like,
that's such a great video.
Yeah, but I'm like, you do know what the song is? I'm like, no, I've never heard it. I'm like, you've heard it. I guarantee it. It was in every other promo or giant symphony event because it has a symphony in it. That's what's so intriguing about it. And that's what I think these guys, like you say, they're beyond just 90s gods. They literally just changed different waves of their music. Can be meditative in a way. It doesn't it's not even catering to any kind of pop culture necessarily. It's kind of just it gives across all these moods: relaxing, angry energy, energeticness. It's all interjects with. It's a people album as opposed to see how many times I can take one bizarre beat and remix it 5 different times in, Adobe or, beginning 90s computer software. No, it's like, no, that like you say, to mistake them with house music would just not only be an insult, but I mean, it would just be just like, no, I mean, house is all about kind of more, how do you describe house? Because house is, trance is going to be very intense. It's basically hardcore electronic, and house is kind of more, it's a party. Let me look up a way to explain. I guess it's very hard to explain.
Yeah, and it's not, it's not my area of expertise. So that's why I just wanted to keep it real general. Another thing my DJ friend said that one of the reasons why it's called electro beats is because it has that 80s electro vibe, that
the new wave, synth wave, and
that kind of thing is definitely a big part of their sound. And it different things grab different people, but this is always, from the moment I heard it, I'm like, yeah, this is my jam. This is what invigorates me.
Because okay, so examples of house music would be someone like deadmau 5, which is interesting because Benny Benassi. And so I was like, yeah, that was definitely in more 2000s, more recent. But it is wild. It's like both synthwave and house started in the 80s, but house was kind of more in the Chicago scene. So that definitely makes better sense because like new wave is just more common. I mean, we talked about New Order, how they got remixed. Those guys definitely, I knew a lot of their songs. It's just they were on the radio all the time, and they were I mean, you could call The Cure probably, I guess, new wave music. And with Nine Inch Nails, it's kind of more interesting because they're industrial rock, but they're also kind of electro rock.
Right. Yeah, but we were talking to my friend too that like Lords of Acid is sort of it's also breakbeat, but it has a lot of that. It's hip hop too. There's kind of that broken. No, it's not hip hop, but that was when he was saying hip hop is also broken beat. But that's what I said too about Lords of Acid is that to me that's a little bit more industrial. It's a little harder, but yeah, I can see the similarity to Crystal Method in terms of the broken beats and that.
They were on one of those Mortal Kombat albums too, I think, right?
I'm sorry, what?
Weren't they on one of the Mortal Kombat albums as well, Lords of Acid?
I wouldn't be surprised.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely, I would see them basically stacked on a bunch of different remix sound albums, Lords of Acid, and they were interesting because I don't know if they ever got a proper music video, but I knew the name and I definitely had heard them, and it was just interesting how if there's anything that we were proven in the 90s, aside from, again, technology breakthroughs, different social scene and everything, it was that anyone can be successful in any kind of medium, and it kind of continued. And now you're seeing all these people nowadays complain about different breakthroughs and oversaturated market. And it's like, well, that's just it. The more money you spend and the more creativity you have to display, the more likely you are to get an audience. And I think that's just it. Everyone's just got to realize it's like, before you put fame and fortune, just get together, love doing what you do, and keep working on it until it's ready to be unleashed. And hearing these guys, you know, Scott and Jordan just both talk about their creative process is just intriguing because they, like you say, they seem just so naturally just down to earth, and they knew what they were good at instead of worrying, I think, about, you know, it's like, how many records am I going to even sell?
Right.
Like, they were just performing at the clubs, and the record producers looking for new talent came to them. So, I mean,
yeah, well, obviously a lot of people came to them even right after Vegas saying, hey, we want a piece of this sound. We want to use it for this.
everyone
project.
wants to use them, as opposed to just one studio wants them over the other, you know?
Right. So back to what I brought up about the end, like, so here's where we are now. I guess I want to mention this first. A lot of times a band, you know, they'll come up with an iconic logo that becomes part of their visual representation, in the way that the prism is Dark Side of the Moon and Big Floyd.
Yes.
But having that ball with all the speaker heads in it, from the cover to Legion of Boom, that image is become very ubiquitous in his shows. It's part of the visuals behind him. That ball
nice.
will rotate, and all the speakers will be bouncing out of the ball, and then other images will float around it. And I really like that album. Divided by Night is great, but it's the one album I've listened to the least. And then here's where we get after that album. Scott got sick for a while, but he recovered. And then says that it was 2017 that Ken Jordan decided to retire from music. And that's all it says. But it reminded me of what you just said about do what you love. And if at a certain point Ken's like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to focus on my family or other things. You know, he wants to do what he loves. That's great. But the key question is, the Trip Home came out in 2018, and the Trip Out is the newest album that just came out on February 18th of 2022, and has the one song that he's doing on that show. And the question from myself is, how different are these two albums than the previous stuff? And I can't really feel much difference. To me, you know, none of their albums are exactly the same. The later stuff isn't quite, you know, what the earlier stuff is. But both of these albums just feel like a natural progression for an artist that's being true to himself. These albums feel true to the entire history of Crystal Method. I really like both of them. They have highlights and things that aren't quite as grabby as others, but both of them have really amazing standout songs.
They always put some thought into it, even if it wasn't a song I was going to likely replay. And I think they covered so much ground, so it's like they don't have to perfect anything anytime soon, really.
Interesting side note too, the first single from the new one features Iggy Pop on it.
Ooh,
so that's fun.
Sweet.
And I don't know, maybe that brings us full circle, because from Vegas to the Trip Out,
what more do we need?
That's just, you know, true to themselves and great. And if you love movies and movie music and want to hear something that's really fun in the vein of listening to movie soundtracks, but goes, you know, beyond that, isn't just movie soundtracks, yeah, just check out Crystal Method, because there's so much there to jazz your creative juices.
They're hip, but they're also personal. Yeah, it is kind of jazzy. They definitely use some trumpets in some mid-2000s songs.
Yeah, the term for me is it's groovy. It's got that you get that funk kind of groove to it. That's, yes, there's that intense beat going on, that intense drum and bass, not that it's drum and bass music, but you know, that intensity, but there's a groove behind all of it that's always infectious and always funky and always flowy, and that's what I really like about it.
Yeah, I I don't think anyone can turn away unless they just absolutely just don't understand or like electronic of any capacity.
Yeah, I understand. It's also not everyone's cup of tea. I mean, there's people out there that are, still spritzing all over themselves for, oh shoot, again, me and my brain. That discordant music that came out right after this, that you can see Kramer from Seinfeld jumping all over the car when it comes on the radio. What's it called? You know what I mean?
Kind of more catchy pop music, or
no, it's that electronic dance music that kind of goes.
Scatman, or
no, I'm being terrible now. You're gonna have to edit all this out because I'm trying to remember what the freaking.
I'm always editing now, but I mean, okay, Kramer electronic music.
Oh yeah, that's good. Kramer, Seinfeld. Dubstep.
Dubstep. Oh wow. Oh yeah, someone did.
Yeah, there's a great scene of him in the car and some dubstep comes on and he's listening to the beginning of it. It's all like, oh, this is nice. And then suddenly the dubstep breaks in and he just starts spasming all over the car like, what the hell is this? But anyway,
looks like everyone's done some
apologies
YouTube
to the people who like dubstep and better than Crystal Method that I couldn't remember the word. But again, I have brain fartitis.
Everyone's done some edits of them. It seems like there's like a compilation of just all his entrances redubbed with dubstep.
Oh, nice. Yeah, but there's a great episode of him driving to dubstep that's actually from the show.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, well. It's all on Netflix, so I'm gonna have to do.
And there's some dubstep I like. It's not, in the majority of it's not my cup of tea. But
I think it was just Skrillex got a big head, and then everyone else was taking from Skrillex. So then it was just like,
right,
that
is what Kramer's listening to in the car is Skrillex.
Yeah, and there you go. And it's just like, you can't expect. I mean, when you're remixing things, to cry, Lord have mercy about it, is like, be happy that people are even using your wacky music. It's just like you've entered a zone where it's very gray, where it's kind of hard. It's just kind of like sampling, it's you own it, but you kind of don't. It's got to be like under a minute when you take something from a previous established like movie or other song.
Yeah. But I've always enjoyed samples in music when they're done well. Going back to Big Audio Dynamite used to do that first album with all the spaghetti westerns mixed in.
Mm-hmm. It was great, and there's a bunch of 90s. It's like a mixture of house music and like R&B that I got, and there's one great rap song where they pretty much just use over and over the "You Can't Handle the Truth" from Few Good Men.
Right, that's a good one. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know the artist.
The more psychedelic the music, the more likely you're going to hear Timothy Leary, Alan Watts, or Terrence McKenna talking in the background.
Aren't you glad you got mentioned? Oh, man. Well, thanks a dozen for being on here, my dude. It is always great just taking these deep dives because we're actually kind of figuring out and making sense of why this certain era kind of, stood out in many ways, and kind of continued for a while, even with people who weren't following certain people or artists. So, I mean,
that's why usually I try to jump on with you when you've got a topic it's just, I think it's a lot easier to do authentic, conversation when you pick a topic that you feel naturally enthusiastic about,
Yeah, the ones that everyone was asking me on about, I was like, that's going to be a while. I'm not up to date. I haven't seen enough of that subgenre or movies or music. And, unless I can really relate to one particular album that got a bunch of radio play and I got like 5 other people on the panel who are hardcore fans, it's not going to be a complete conversation. It's going to be half-assed, and I don't want that. So.
All right. Well, these are not. These are fun. So
No, this is
I
great.
appreciate it, and it's always good to hang out with you, my friend, and we'll look forward to it next time.
For sure. And cool to know that people are plugging their favorite radio stations too.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find decent radio anymore. So, I'm always, I remember growing up, I could listen to these great radio stations when I moved to New York that were on from 1 a.m. till 6. And now, local radio is very commercial, but we have such a global access to all this stuff on internet radio.
Right.
And we live in such a saturated culture of media that it's great to have curated music that you can really only get from a really good sort of DJ or host that can be introducing you to stuff the same way that what we're doing with the show. We're doing recommendations, and a good radio station and a good DJ can really introduce you to stuff in a way that just trying to sift through the minefield of just how much crap is out there is just
Right.
so hard to do.
Oh man, my uncle, when he was at some of the gay clubs in the 90s, he just found it just so funny how just half the music was totally bootlegged from like overseas, like Japan or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like with anime, it's just like there was no legal way at that point. So to get it overseas in any capacity was great. Just share the love. And then eventually it gets back to the executives and they're like, we better actually acknowledge every degree of the fan base that we've obtained,
Right.
And it is kind of wild though, how it's like sometimes they'll have to like do a total like deep dive explaining everything they sampled or took.
Mm-hmm.
And it is cool because like you say, is like it opens you up. I mean, when I'm in my company car at work and it'll have the display, and so half the time I will be hearing a song that I kid you not, I have not heard since like 95 at like a random mall or grocery store. And I'm like, so that's who was playing all those years all ago that I never knew.
Yeah.
That was that person.
Nice. Cool.
Oh, again, thank you for, hopefully you pimp slapped enough people to know more about the crystal method.
Yeah, get out there.
Yeah, figure it out. You should know.
Because everyone's like, yeah, we know. We love it.
But do you really? Have you just only heard that one or two songs? Yeah.
Right.
Oh, man. Have a blessed day and keep kicking ass.
Yeah, you too, buddy. Thanks for the opportunity to chat with you and do these. They're super fun. And take no prisoners.
Take no prisoners.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up